Studio Ghibli movies are kind of insane. They've gained a huge audience over the years and spanned from 3D assisted animation to fully hand-drawn films that make me want to break my fingers out of respect for the animators. A lot of people have seen the big ones, Totoro, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Ghost in the Shell 2. But one movie that I haven't seen get as much recognition is The Wind Rises. Now this could be because of its more grounded and realistic structure or its lack of, magic, but whatever the case, I haven't seen any anime mall stores selling chibi dolls of Nahoko Satomi, and that totally makes sense. It's a drastically different story than a movie about a giant rat who uses a Beyblade to fly around rural Japan, but this film is still strangely entrancing to me. It was spawned from the hands of Hayao Miyazaki, who, if you didn't know, is an old man who makes a huge pile of noodles for his staff every day, that's real, and draws Big Airplane for fun. He wrote, directed, and helped animate this film, which is kinda crazy if you know how movies work. Plus, he was also responsible for pretty much every successful Studio Ghibli feature, so if anything, this is a beautiful film. It's packed to the brim with animation as smooth as butter and wondrous landscapes of elegance and suffering. Sometimes you'll just sit there and be like, whoa, that animation is really good, because it is, okay? Look! But behind the artistic wonder and amazing craftsmanship is a story. A story about Big Airplane! The Wind Rises follows Jidou Hitokoshi, who was actually a real guy back when he was alive. He was most well known for engineering the Zero, an incredibly famous plane used in World War II that could go really fast. And while this movie is about him, it takes a crazy amount of liberties when going through his story. Most of the events in the film cover his personal life, things happening behind the veil of the public eye, things that Miyazaki, made up. But no, I mean, it's not a bad thing. He's allowed to do that. And if anything, it adds to the story. It's just a little something to keep in mind while watching. And speaking of watching this movie is kind of weird. It's almost like tapping really quickly through someone's story on Instagram. One second he'll be on a train and the next he'll be dead. No, okay, he's fine. It scrolls through his life with seamless transitions, and sometimes it takes a second to realize that 7 years just passed. For some, this might confuse and frighten you. What's going on? What's happening? But I think it's a perfect way to show time passing in someone's life. It's fast, sometimes covering scenes that might not even feel important to the overall movie, but it's kind of the whole point. In the end, a real human life isn't as structurally precise as a written story, and while Miyazaki obviously wrote this, he made sure to keep that feeling present throughout the film. Sometimes there's a huge plane falling apart, and sometimes they're just eating sponge cake in a tiny hotel. For you simple-minded goblin folk, it might be boring. It's understandable, but to me it's cool. It makes you want to get off my ass and stop playing Resident Evil all day, which, it's pretty good. Still, this type of storytelling had a huge effect on me when I first watched it. I was also a toddler. It gave my tiny, feeble mind a glimpse at how fast time can actually feel, and I'm pretty sure it was the main cause of me having an existential crisis about death in 4th grade. It doesn't exactly hold your hand. It shoves you into the harsh reality of natural catastrophes, critical illness, and even Nazi Germany. But it doesn't dwell on them for too long, pushing through the story at a pace that's more focused on Jidou's life than anything else. And while the camera isn't glued to him, there are some scenes where he isn't even present, it's prominently a story about him. Despite its realistic setting, Miyazaki somehow still slips his wonderful imagination into it as well, using dream sequences and even visuals taking place in the characters' heads to show off his insane magical ideas. Like there was this big thing with the flames and bombs. The heck is that? It also over-exaggerates certain events for the sake of feeling. For example, this earthquake scene when the railroad tracks turn into a huge wave of land. This movie does something entirely unique with its sound design. While most of the regular sound effects are, sound effects made to match the real sound, a lot of the other sounds are made with actual human voices. Now, I've never seen this done in a movie before. It's so cool. Like, it's a completely new idea to me. So far, I've only seen this used on locomotives and some natural elements, but it's never completely consistent. The only actual consistent place that it's used is the planes. Now, Miyazaki is kind of in a long-term relationship with aircrafts in general. Almost all of his movies have at least one big flying thing, and apparently he has huge books full of airplanes back home just for personal pleasure. I think the voiced sound effects on the planes might symbolize his passion for them. It almost feels like he's breathing through this movie. Miyazaki is the aircrafts, and in a way, it's almost like a last hurrah. It's no secret that he's getting older. I mean, that's what people do. But he had the intention of this being his final film. We all know this is a dirty lie, and he's working on another one right now, but even he said that he doesn't know if he's gonna make it to the end of this one. For the love of God, I hope he does, but we gotta think about that. He made this film with the thought in mind that it might be his last. So it feels like a love letter to his cinematic history. There's constant callbacks to his older films sprinkled throughout the experience, and to ignore them you would have to be blind. And while it's completely different from those older films, it reminds you of everything he's created. Now, there is one thing in this movie that I think Miyazaki has finally perfected. One thing that it does flawlessly. The atmosphere in this movie is perfection. Every background, every setting, every environment brings me into the world with a pristine attention to detail that can only be accomplished by the work of legends. Some of the best scenes in the movie don't even involve anyone talking. When those quiet, reserved moments come up, the film is at its peak. All of Miyazaki's films captured this at least once, and when those scenes hit, perfect. Now, this movie's ending fucked me up. I won't be spoiling anything, don't worry, but let's just say at this point in my life, I probably don't know what real love feels like. I mean, what, I'm like 12? But this movie came pretty damn close to disclosing that information to me. I burst out crying like 3 times out of nowhere in the 3rd act. Like, I legit didn't even see it coming. I was just fine, I was sitting there, and then boom, broken. And that doesn't happen very often. If a movie makes me cry, it's either really good, really sad, or Bionicles 3, The Web of Shadows. I really felt like I was there with the characters, and the final scene made me want to get up, be productive, and make my life worthwhile. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to make this video. I felt the need to share it with everyone else. Watch this movie, and whether you need it or not, you will be reminded of how beautiful and fragile life really is. It also has big airplane!